Take us away.
Okay, welcome back to another VLOGCAST. Make Physio Great Again. Nick, as always, with my co-host, best friend, hero, Andrew Coppin. Hello, Andrew.
How's it, Nick? I don't know if you saw, bro, 100 views on our YouTube post. The air's getting pretty thin up here.
Essentially viral, some might say. That's why we have to follow it up while the iron is hot. There we go.
Even had to put my inaugural, the originals, bro. Day one, some would call it.
It is actually Maritzburg United against Cape Town City tonight. So yeah, big game for both of us. I'm sure you're going to work later. I'm working with some of the PNISs back at home today.
Yeah. So how's that name, bro? If you read it, it always, it's a bit degrading if you ask me. Yeah.
But big clash tonight. So I'm going to be rooting for the blue and my buddy Calvin.
As you should. I think we need this one. It's been a tough start to the season, but I think that's just what it is. Yeah. That's just what it is in professional sport.
Let's maybe jump straight off that train. It's obviously early part of the season, right? Football preseason, medicals have happened. In the cricket space, we are still in the preseason. I'd still even say we're in early, like the longest early preseason I've ever experienced. It's a very unique sport on its own. But let's talk a little bit about preseason screening, testing, those sort of things. What are some of the misconceptions? You know, what's good, what's bad, what must we check?
I think it's a difficult thing, especially from a football side. I mean, the age-old adage, as you say, is what are you actually going to use the fitness testing for? It's not just something to fill your first day of preseason with testing who's fat now after the preseason. I mean, it's a screening tool that we use who's kind of let their fitness levels drop. But what are you actually going to use, and how big should your battery of testing be? Obviously, I don't know what it's like for you guys at cricket. What kind of tests do you guys generally use?
So I think one of the nice things about cricket is that the governing body, CSA, have their own sort of like MSK, and it's stuff that we covered a lot in our M program with Dr. Janine Gray and those people. So I think it's actually really well validated MSK screening. But then again, the same debate always comes up. What do you use the data for? What is it used for? And a lot of people are like, man, it's actually pointless, because if I do it this season and then I leave and someone else comes to do it with the same group of players, maybe the numbers vary and all these sorts of things, which they do have a point of. But I think also doing nothing is even more unhelpful, you know? So
it was,
you know what? I feel like the core root of this issue is that people just don't understand, or they don't start it with a like goal in mind. You know what I mean? They kind of do it knowing that they don't understand it. And I think that's where the problem lies.
I think, what we've done generally is to obviously save money between Lee, the head of performance, and myself and our interns. We've kind of split up the battery of testing, and we've made it as simple as possible, but also as cost effective as possible, because, you know, testing 30 guys can be quite expensive depending on what test you're doing. But what we found is there's been some horrible stuff. We'd basically break it up into your anthropometrics with one of the guys, maybe the bio doing body fat and weight. And then we would do some jump tests and some sprint tests. And that would involve the coaches kind of having stopwatches, and it's kind of like a go, and everyone has to start their stopwatch at the same time. And it's really, at the end of the day, almost thumb sucking, because it's not going to be accurate as you want. And having interns in at some of the bleep tests, you get levels that you never even thought bleep tests had, 25.9 and things that you've never actually seen before. And you can't actually go back and test those things, because you can't rerun a bleep test for one or two guys. So what we did this season was we took everyone to sports science and actually did, you know, they've got the timing gates, they've got everything there. They've got cool bleep test stuff that they use, and it was really accurate. But again, we're sitting with all this data. We've got 5 or 6 guys that arrived after preseason testing, and now they don't have data. What are we using this data for? And basically what I've done is I've picked guys that are maybe at higher risk of injury or complained of injuries in their preseason, and then gone back just to look at that data and see, is there ankle dorsiflexion issues? Is there jump issues? Is there disparities between the left and right on their triple hops, left and right side, and just kind of build that in more so than anything else. But yeah, you can't really.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that a lot of people, so maybe let's just move to the MSK stuff, more what us physios are in control of. But I think what we do sometimes is we think that we're going to predict players getting injured based on what their tests are. But I think the most valuable thing is to realize that it's actually all about like stratifying risk, or even just identifying risk for a single individual. And then, that's sort of earmarking some things for you to then work on. You know what I mean? So, for example, you take the history and you say, okay, in the past 2 years, there's been quite a serious ankle injury. Then you try and link that to maybe a knee to wall. Then you maybe do some triple hops and things. Then you maybe look at, I don't know, we're using ISO dynamometry now. So you'd maybe look at dorsiflexion. We can chat about that.
Shut up. Maybe we get a sponsor on the podcast earlier. 100 views, guys. 100 guys. Jump on all you can.
Your audio is scrambling a little bit quickly. I don't just test it again quickly.
Can you hear me still? That's not, maybe let me just change this.
Okay.
Let me just change this. Is that better? Let's just go back to basics.
Much better.
Yeah.
So then try and link all of those data together, if you know what I mean. And then, and even going a further step back, in terms of what to chuck, I think we must chuck this term injury prevention, because even the verbiage there is like an absolute fallacy. Like it should actually be injury risk reduction or injury.
It just doesn't sound as cool. And then maybe you're making physio seem less cool. If we can't prevent injuries, then what are we actually doing?
Yeah, but the thing is, now it goes back to the whole, screening, prediction, associations, stats. I sent you that. I'll put the link in our comments. But there is a statement that Vold put out. It's Livy in the background having a great time. Bad life. They put out a statement basically about the whole, and I think it's pretty ballsy for a medical tech company to basically almost call themselves out and say, look, don't use our products to try and predict injury, but in the context of what's happening in research, here's how you can kind of use this as a tool effectively. And I think that's something that no one does it. For years, we've had Biodex and Cybex and all these other things that literally, even in the literature, people try to sell as injury prediction tools, which again, if you follow that thread enough, was proven to be like thrown out. But yet when we're signing someone, we put them through that test, and that is often like a gold standard test, even in isolation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think we need to know that, and I think we need to realize that. And I think if you're selling snake oil, you'll always try and cover your tracks as much as possible. And like you say, ballsy move from Vault, but they obviously trust their products, and they can say, look, this is what our products can do, and this is what they're not going to do. If you're trying to get one size fits all injury prediction, we're not going to be able to give you that. And I think that also shows that they're comfortable with what the information that they're giving you. I mean, a Cybex is obviously a lot more expensive on a one shot all basis, but Cybex are not able to predict injuries just as much as like a Vault system. So what are you actually paying for? And I think that's, like you said, that's ballsy, but I think it also helps. I think it's good. It's good overall. I remember my paper in undergrad or in postgrad, actually, Cybex, the gold standard of irrelevance. And we chatted about that this week. And yeah, I think while it is maybe not a one size fits all, there's definite benefits. And I think we spoke about that as well. How you see things actually needs to change in this industry, because you need to see how things work in an everyday environment. And we'll chat about kind of Cybex and all those things. But yeah, if your thoughts and opinions aren't changing, are you really growing as a as a physio, I think a lot of my preconceived ideas have changed being in the industry and seeing what works clinically. And I think you have to be able to change. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think we were chatting about isokinetic testing and just saying, like, we had very strong views against it. But I think in the context, we were in an area where someone was kind of pushing it as a tool that we kind of believe the science didn't advocate for, if you know what I mean, in terms of like, you do this standalone test and we're going to be able to tell whether you can train or play or, you know, and until you reach certain numbers, you shouldn't be able to participate or train, which I think is also like, that was just a shortfall in that sort of setting. But like you say, I think the ability to be good in this industry is for your views to change when you get presented with new information. And now look at both of us using isokinetic testing, but sort of saying, okay, cool, it's one part of, because injuries are so multifactorial, that needs to be one part of a multifactorial battery that helps you to make a decision. It's not the be all and end all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. 100%, and it also just supports your decisions. I think you and I working for high professional sports, you can't just, you can be trusted, you can people can trust you in your organization, but you still have to back up some of your decisions. And I think, you know, your testing equipment definitely gives you a basis as to why you're saying certain things. Yes, this player is ready. No, this guy is ready. Here's one of my objective tests that I'm able to use to back up my answer. So I generally wouldn't use isokinetic testing across the board, just for fees and cost of use. But if someone, say, has a serious knee injury, I can test him and we can compare left and right. And again, we know that's not going to maybe predict re-injury. The chances of him having a re-injury is based more on the injury history itself and his age, what they've proven. But yeah, isokinetic testing alone is not going to give you that risk. But if you do find a huge disparity, it can be a reason to keep working on certain shortfall. So
let's maybe go into you know, it's the interesting about if we go into like the medical fields now, and especially in football. So in cricket, I actually can't really comment on how medicals work, because it's kind of like how football used to be, where players just pop up and you're like, okay, cool, this person's part of our squad now, and then you do the intake and find XYZ and all these things happening. But I think in football, it's becoming a bit more commonplace to try and screen for risk factors and mitigate that in the sign or before the signing process. But what do you find to be most valuable? And I think maybe let's separate. Obviously, there's medical parts of the screening, which we use sports doctors for. But then from a physio point of view, and even from a performance point of view, because some of the things that, here's some of the scenarios that have popped up. We've had guys that arrive with either like chronic low loads and then don't cope from a capacity point, and then have overuse injuries like early on in the trial period even, or guys that arrive with overuse injuries, tendinopathy things. But now, how do you really screen for that? Because it only comes out once you're actually in the training phase. You can do your medicals, you can look for range, you know, and you might actually not find anything. Right. So like, what's some of the counterintuitive things that you think we should be doing when medical signing guys, looking at how athletes actually can perform?
I think it's so tough. Generally based, our screening and our pre-signing medicals are probably based more on the player's value than anything else. You know, a high earning player is going to facilitate a lot bigger pre-medical signing. I mean, you're not going to send a guy that's making $5-6 grand a month for 30 grand pre-signing medical with MRIs, etc., because it's just not going to be worth it on the bottom line. Again, if you're paying a guy 200K a month, then it might be worth, you know, spending 30K before you can actually sign this player. But what I've realized, coming back to what you said now, players are so good at pretending that they fine through their trial period, whether that's a week and they can be hobbling on one leg, get through the trial period, and then now they're sitting with a huge injury that they just didn't say anything about. So it's difficult in football. You're also picking up players for cheap if they're injured. So that's something that I think club owners just take the chance on. And then it's up to guys like yourself and myself to try to fix them, increase their value, and then sell them on. So we know how things should work, and we know how things work in the EPL. I mean, they've got a 3-day medical that you can watch on Sky Sports for. I can literally take a new player from the airport in my car past the doctor in half an hour. So it's a difficult one, and it's frustrating because you know how it should work. But I think
that's an incredible insight into how things actually work. And I think that's a lot of the things that people don't actually realize, if you know what I mean. Yeah, maybe we need a bit more time to pass, but I'm sure we can share some crazy stories about how these things, how people think that they work, and then how, what actually happens on the ground, carting players around for testing and things, picking up guys for appointments and going with them to things, like some of just the random stuff that you end up doing as part of our
and footballers are absolutely horrible at doing things for themselves. I don't know if they placed you, they can get people to do things for them, or if they just generally don't have the experience at going to doctors on their own. So they never really learn what they have to do. So a lot of the time you end up redoing the work if you don't just do it yourself firsthand. But coming back to your question, from a physio perspective, I don't know if I really see the value in these new player, in like a new player arriving and doing all your range and everything like that. For me, it'll be when a guy first arrives, it'll be just, a chat and building that relationship, which we spoke about last week as being one of the most important, being like, hey, this is me. If you need anything, come see me. And then just kind of trying to find out what previous injuries they've had and working backwards from. And obviously they might not be so forthcoming with any kind of serious injuries, but it's up to us to obviously do our research and say, okay, this oak's had a knee. Let's then have a quick look at his knee range as we go. Let's look at his muscle bulk. But getting every person to come in and do knee to walls and stuff like that, it's just not viable, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think we end up reaching out to a lot of our colleagues in the industry, but just something that I've observed, something that might be better would be for players and or their agents, whoever, to own all their own history, for them to own their GPS data. So you can go to a club and say, here's my numbers on the field, and this is where I rank as a midfielder. Here's my injury history. You can see I had an MCL, but I was only out for X amount of time, and I made a full recovery because here's my numbers post. If you know what I mean? Like that can also give them a lot more power in the signing, where sometimes being injury prone might give clubs a loophole to kind of, put certain terms and reduce rates in contracts and all sorts of other sort of things. So yeah, I think we're moving to an age where maybe players need to own their own data a little bit more, which is tricky, especially if players are like babied and they don't really take responsibility for themselves. But I think that's definitely a conversation worth having.
I think it's also ethically, like us having to call around behind the scenes without actually having explicitly asked the players. Also, obviously, there's an ethical dilemma there. I mean, I got a call from one of the bigger clubs saying, look, I know this person's maybe had this injury, but sort of what are they like as a professional? Because you kind of have to dance around this question of, would you sign him based on what you've seen from him, basically. So then we have also objective. I mean, you could have had a bad relationship with a player in the past. Now you can kill his whole career by saying, no, this oak doesn't do his rehab. His injury is horrible. I would never sign him. You can actually have a detrimental effect on this guy's career. So you also have to be careful with what you share and how you share it. And it's not our job to sign or not sign players, but I speak more then about my relationship with the person and what they are like as a professional, more so than the injuries that they've had. So yeah, ethically, I think that's also something to think about. If players had their own files and moved with their own files and just took some responsibility for their own careers, it would also help them in the long run.
Absolutely. Drew, maybe let's move on quickly to some return to play testing. I think it's something that people probably would find quite interesting, especially when you're looking at someone that I'm looking at later today. It's a whole Are they included? Are they not included? What criteria do they need to meet to then become available? How much physical training do we need to put on them? What imaging do we need to do to kind of support our decisions? Like, what things do you consider when you're making return to play decisions? And how hard is it to say to a coach, okay, yeah, 15 minutes off the bench, or, you know, only the warm-up and small-sided games as part of a training session today? How do you justify those things?
Like, if we're honest, that is all thumbsuck. There is absolutely there's no research to support any kind of testing battery prior to return to play. And I think that comes back to our preseason testing. I try use that as much as possible to try and say, okay, this is where the levels you were at before you were injured, and can we get you back there? And in theory, that's what I try and do, but it's purely thumbsuck, and it's purely based on experience, I would say. I mean, I try in my rehab is this term functional rehab, but what I try and do is I try build the game around the player, from obviously your beginning phase when you're in the gym with me to on the field, and try go step by step into what skills and what functional skills are you going to need player specific to pass before you can be kind of eligible to go back into training. So a left needs to, for example, or a wing back needs to go up and down quite often. So they need to be obviously be able to sprint, change direction, decelerate, accelerate, cross. So those are the things that I'll work on the side. And only once they've done a couple of those with me, are we even thinking about putting them back into kind of training. And then it's purely a thumbsuck of how long they can play. I mean, I know there's Raymond Verheyen has his 30 minutes first, and then 40 minutes, and then 60 minutes, which in theory sounds great. But if you're playing Sundowns on Saturday, a 30-minute can quickly turn into a 90-minute. And then the player can maybe get through that, and you can, thank your lucky stars. And then you're playing a game on Tuesday against Maritzburg, and then they're saying, oh, but we need him again. So it's difficult. And I think expectations are important as well. You can tell the coach that, look, I can probably get him through a 30 or a 60 this Saturday, but then on Tuesday we need to make another plan. And to coaches, every game is the most important. So they're gonna forget it. They're gonna forget what you tell them and push them again. But there is no hard and fast rule. I think you just need to make your decisions based on the player, or how pain resilient, I would say. Are they resilient? What are the chances, and what is a re-injury going to cost them in terms of time? So if it's a hamstring strain and you're trying to rush them back 1 week too early, you could set yourself back 8 weeks in the grand scheme of things. If it's something small, I mean, you can take more chances. What do you think?
Do you know what's funny? I think we deal with this on from school level to professional level. It's everywhere, whether you are a pro sport clinician like yourself, or whether you work in school sports. I think coaches, everybody wants to know, is this guy going to be available for the weekend? How much can he play? How hard can he play? All these sorts of things. So I think it's quite a topical issue. But again, if we so obviously the clinical things are important, they support your decision making, but let's go to the soft skills, and something that people maybe don't consider. I always think the amount of times you get this decision right, gives you a lot of buy-in from coaches potentially. So like, say you're adamant and you make a big scene about, no, he can't play for more than 45 minutes or whatever, and they play 45 minutes and nothing happens. You kind of lose a bit of buy-in,
100%.
And vice versa, right? So I think the tricky thing is how do you keep managing expectations and managing your relationship with the players and the coaches to make good decisions more often, because you're also going to get it wrong fairly frequently, right? But I think it's managing the process that gives you rapport enough for when you say X, Y, and Z, then the coach trusts you. Because on the other hand, and I feel like I'm going to be critical of physios again, as we always are, sometimes we're overly conservative. And we make up these abstract things which we know there's no evidence for, right? And then it just comes across as silly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't train the whole week, but he's gonna do 15 minutes on Thursday or Friday, and then we'll decide on Well, actually, no, you want to kind of gradually expose them as much as you can through the week to make the best possible decision by Thursday, Friday. If you sit and do nothing, you're actually making it harder for yourself to make a good decision at the end of the week. You know what I mean? So
100%.
Definitely experience plays a role, but then also the soft skills on managing people's expectations. And then even going back to last week's conversation, it comes back to like, how do you manage yourself? Are you like the panicky physio that's like, oh, this is the toughest thing, it's like the craziest, put him in a moon boot and crutches right away type of thing? Or are you kind of like, you know what, it's just a bruise, let's give it 24 hours or 48 hours, let's wait and see, it's not that bad, we'll reassess, you know?
And in professional sport, every injury is the biggest injury to ever happen to a football player in the world, because they're the most needed player for this week. I mean, I had, for example, end of last year, I had a player injured that was on the bench and kind of in and out of the squad. And as soon as he was injured, oh my God, we need him back. He must be back. Like, we're losing because this guy's not here. He was when he got injured, he was actually at home. Playing. He didn't even make the squad that week, and that's when he got injured. But now all of a sudden we're like waiting for this guy to get back. And I think that's always going to be there. And coming back to your soft skills, I read a thing on the just the decision-making process, and you can take a lot of pressure off yourself by having the difficult meetings. I think we are a bridge between the player and the coach, and most of our meetings are having a meeting with the player, and the player saying, oh, I can't play this week. And then you go to the coach and you say, oh, well, his medical stuff says he's okay, but he says he's not going to be able to play. So it's probably not the right thing to do. And then you get shat on from the coach saying, but he should be playing and all these things. So sometimes having the difficult meeting where you have the player, you have yourself, and you have the coach all in one meeting, it's probably the best way that all three of you then decide. You can give your opinion based on, look, it's been 4 weeks, and MCL usually takes 4 weeks. You've been passing in my drills. I'm comfortable that you'll be able to play 30 minutes, but how are you feeling? Then the player can give his 2 cents, which is probably the most important in that whole hierarchy, and say, look, I'm feeling I can probably play. And then the coach can say, look, it's the final of the MTN 8. I need you this week. Then I'll give you 2-3 weeks off, but let's just get you through there. And then between the three of you, you can make a decision. And then it's not the coach isn't twisting your words and going to chat to the players saying you're lazy doing rehab. And I think it's just,
you know what's crazy about that? I think you hit the nail on the head, because we end up speaking about this person. You know, me and the trainer will speak about the situation. Me and the coaches will speak about the situation, right? You will, it just goes round and round and round forever, if you know what I mean. But we don't actually just say, let's have an uncomfortable conversation with everybody present, and it's open cards. Yeah, get it out the way, and, you know, make the reasonable decision together in one go, instead of speaking about everything. And like you say, words get twisted. The coach wants me to do this. The player runs back to you and says, yeah, it gets crazy.
And reasonable decisions often get blown out of proportion. I think we spoke about one of our other points coming up is, high performance, you have to be resilient and have a thick skin, as they say. And I always say, you got to have foreskin when there's a boys club and a boys environment. And that's not to say that females in sport, I'm all for it, but it's just, you become this, this boys club, and there's a lot of egos that you now have to manage. I end up fighting with the coach about certain things, and everybody's got their own agendas, which is kind of what our topic was this week. After being away with the team for a whole week, you kind of realize that everyone has their own point of view. Everyone has their thing that they're protecting, whether that's their job, whether that's their career, whether that's themselves, whether that's their ego. And you have to kind of manage
their opinions, approaches to training, approaches to football, or their sport.
100%. And everyone's got this agenda, and it's not always a negative agenda and not always out to get you, but people become so tied to their opinions that things that are usually not a problem or weren't, I hate to say this because I'm all about taking responsibility, but weren't your problem to begin with, all of a sudden become the biggest thing, and you're involved and you've now done something wrong, when if you just go back to first principles, it wasn't even you to start with. So it's how these things all kind of get jumbled, and you have to also realize that there are a lot of, everyone's got kind of these factors that are making these decisions bigger in their mind, and you just kind of have to say the right thing, stick to your guns, but also do it, I think, respectfully, but also you need to have good relationships and these soft skills with everyone, because otherwise you get seen as this physio with this huge opinion. I get told I have a big personality, but also when that suits you, that's a great thing. But now that I'm against you, now it's the worst thing in the world. So it's like, it's a problem. And they say Andrew Coppin is a problem.
How do you deal with and this is for anybody that's even in any work environment, right? But in this day and age, everybody takes things very personally, okay? And it's hard to tell people the truth, honestly, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you have good rapport with them and they kind of realize, well, I'm giving you this feedback because it's affecting our collective goal of the team or whatever, right? I used to call, when I worked in football, a bit more full-time. Now I'm on the outskirts and less exciting, but also less tense, if I can say. Used to call it like a shark tank, because every day someone's having a go at someone. Every day someone's having a go at someone. There's like a lot of there's swearing, and sometimes things blow up. But then what I always found interesting was often, like, give it a couple of times, like a couple of days, hours, whatever, it blows over and we're back to normal again, because we wear the same uniform, we're fighting the same cause. But how do you not hold on to those things and take it personally, especially in the age where like younger generations are coming into the workplace, and maybe dealing with like an older coach who's like in his 50s, 60s, who you can say something really harsh and then tomorrow you back to normal, versus the younger people who like, oh, I'm really offended by that. I now can't work with this guy or this person forever and ever. How do you kind of manage that?
I think it comes down to the coach as well. I mean, I've had coaches that I've disagreed with, and we've come to swear at each other. And then it takes me and that coach actually sitting down and being like, this is why I was saying that. And I think coaches also realize quickly how big an influence the physio and, say, the fitness trainer have on the team, because obviously if the physio is walking around with a stink of fruit, it's obviously going to wear off on all the players as well. So depending on how important the personality is to the team, they also, I think, adjust what they say. So if you don't have that relationship with the players, you're obviously maybe not as important to the coach as well. But I think, I mean, for example, just working with Eric, him and I, what I really appreciate with him is that him and I can differ in opinions, and you actually have to get emotive to get your point across. And you're not saying hurtful things to each other, but you're being quite forceful and believing in your opinion. But we can have that meeting and we can be done with that meeting, and the game might not even happen yet, and the tensions can still be high, but then we can go for a gym session together. We can go for a coffee together and not even speak about that issue, if you know what I'm saying. So I think you need to separate what the work is and what the person is, because you can have you can disagree a lot in a football sense, but as a person, the two of you still need to work together. So, I mean, I disagree a lot with people. I get very defensive very quickly, and I shout. That's just my personality. And I think the people around me know that might be a weakness of mine, and they take that in. So if I'm getting defensive, everybody just calm down and let's talk about it maybe later. So I know Lee always sits up straight when I get going and my work is questioned. I think that's a soft spot for me. I take my work seriously. I'm passionate about what I do. I know I work hard, and as soon as you start encroaching on my things, then I'm gonna lash out quickly. And I think it's the same for them. So they've got these ideas, you've got your ideas. If you're both getting defensive, you're gonna butt heads. But I think being consistent and being honest, I think coaches will also appreciate that. But I think removing yourself and removing the person from the game is also important. That's how not to hold grudges. I don't know if you've had any crazy experiences while you've been in the game where you've had.
Not really. Hey, I think, sorry, Drew, we're gonna probably have to wrap up, but let me just put it all together. I think a lot of these things, and like the tension that happens. Tension is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, but it's how both parties handle it. But you can't control how the other person is going to handle it. So you actually just have to really own your own space, right? And I think a lot of that is about one, obviously, just as you get older and maybe a little bit wiser, you learn about these things and you react less harshly every time. But I think also you need to spend the time, like we're saying, it's like the soft skills. So obviously being a great physio and understanding the literature and the science and whatever is a non-negotiable if you want to be at the highest level, right? We never taking that for granted, but
we hope so.
Well, we hope so. But what
Yeah.
the best people, or people who thrive in that space, are really people that also know themselves, know their values, how to work with people, how to work even in tense environments, how to get a point across respectfully, how to argue and disagree respectfully, how to, like, you know, stay fair at all times, all these sorts of things. So it's, again, it kind of comes down to like the interpersonal skills, but that takes time to develop. It takes a lot of work. Like, you have to put in the time to get to know yourself better and kind of, you know, to reflect on, okay, what happened? Why did I do this? You know, all your triggers and stuff already, and you know you're going to react, but you also know that there's a line where it will be tolerated, and you know when you would overstep into like being disrespectful, or, you know, like a complete breakdown of the relationship, etc., etc. And I know, I think you build such a good rapport with people that I think like you can just take those things with a pinch of salt, if you know what I mean. Like that's part of why we enjoy Andrew, because he's gonna push back and make us think, and he's gonna get animated. But it's also because he cares about the team, and you'll see that as well when he gets animated on the bench or borderline gets red cards and things like that.
Yeah, Drew, I agree.
Sorry, we probably gonna have to. Yeah,
I've got 15 seconds. I think coming straight back to what you said, I think sorting things out on the spot when they're not this big problem where people are not talking behind your back and things like that. The worst things that I've seen in football is when guys start going behind to get to the chairman, etc., etc., and that's when relationships really break down. So
Absolutely.
If you can at the time as soon as possible, I think that also helps. It might be ugly now for 5 minutes, and then the problem's gone, rather than being a season-long thing. But yeah, I think we've got 1 minute.
We're gonna have to make this a part 3 or part 4. We're gonna just keep on going, because we didn't even get through all our topics for today. So everybody, stay tuned. There's more coming. Good luck tonight. But also,
thank you so much.
Tonight.
Yeah, well, I would say let's take a draw, but we need this one. So, yeah.
3 points either way. Thanks, Drew. Appreciate you. Okay, well,
cheers, Busy.
Cheers, dude. Bye.
Cheers, man.